here or yellow lines. This is only the progress. This is information about the progress. The important part is the report of this test here. So important is for us the result of the report in there. And this will take a few seconds till this has finished. So test is currently running. Here we can see, here we see often warnings, list of software updates. You have seen my notes, they asked for a restart when I started with the configuration of the cluster. So we have several times a day an update for the Defender parts in the Windows Server. And if one server received the Defender update and the other not, then we have the situation that we have a warning regarding the software level, but we can fix this in installing the updates, the same updates on both servers. And it's not a big problem if we have different software levels, for example, based on security updates or things like this. We can also fix this later in the cluster when we have cluster-aware updating available. So, okay, let's validate or test the software update level. Now it's gathering data about the software update level. So it's still at this point here, but both servers are available. Yeah, both servers are there. This server is also there. So this takes untypically long. Usually it's a little bit faster, but it's a live demo, so things can happen. It's not a pre-recorded video or things like this. So you really see the live steps. You also see the live time. And if we will have an error here, you will see hopefully how we fix this error. So let's see what happens here. Oh, here you can see there was an error retrieving something QFE. So we will see this in the report then when it has finished the testing here. So it's still validating the software update level. Now it's in the networking test. Now it's faster again. Validating the IP configuration. Maybe I was talking a lot when I configured the machines. Maybe I had some typos in the network configuration. I'm not sure about this. We can check this while the test is running. So we have here the networks 101, 102, 103, and always the 1 here. And the domain network is via DHCP. On the second node, let's compare this. We have the 168.101, 102, and the 103, because these are typical issues that you don't have miscabling or misconfiguration in the IP addresses. We will see what the report says at the end of the configuration. So now I have my report here. And we can see testing is completed successfully. The configuration appears to be suitable for clustering. However, you should review the report. So it's not a really big issue, but let's see what the report says. Let's have a look at the report. And the report says, okay, I have a warning in the system configuration, and the validate software update level says that there is no QFE information. And I can tell you what happened. Microsoft expects to have internet connectivity from each cluster node. In my cluster, this is an isolated environment. I don't have internet connectivity from this cluster. This is the reason why I received this warning here where the cluster says, oh, I cannot validate the updates because I cannot reach the Microsoft update server. So this is no problem for us, but the recommendation for the production environment is to have some internet connectivity from the cluster nodes. Okay, let's create the cluster now using the validated nodes. This is here the helpful checkbox, so I don't have to switch to create cluster. I can just create the cluster using the validated nodes. I will click on finish, go to next, and the cluster name is my D201 minus S2D cluster 01. Yeah, the storage space is direct cluster 01. I will go to next, and I don't have a question about any IP addresses because on my domain network interface, I have connectivity to an DHCP server, so IP address is provided dynamically. The checkbox add all eligible storage to the cluster does not do anything in my configuration because I don't have an iSCSI or fiber channel storage. If I would have iSCSI or fiber channel, this would add the disk drives. So let's configure this here. It's forming the cluster, it's building the cluster. At the result here, when we configure this cluster, we have a high available DNS name and a high available IP address. No storage, but a high available DNS name, high available IP address. When I view the report, I can see everything is fine. Yeah, except the wizard didn't find a disk for witness usage. So the recommendation is to configure a file share witness. So we can do this together in a few minutes. So let's see the configuration here. No roles in the cluster. We have the nodes. Both nodes are up and running. We don't have any storage here, so no disk drives or things like this. And when I go to the networks, I will see the networks, they have some cryptic names. So now to be able to use these networks, no, it's wrong. We can already use these networks, but to have a good overview, we should rename these networks. So they are already working, they are usable, but I should check these networks and see if they are using for what I have planned. And what's the correct name here? For example, this is my domain network. This is not cluster network 1. Yes, it's the first cluster network, but this is the network, this IP subnet, where my nodes are connected to the domain. And there I want to allow cluster network communication, but also client communication. So my virtual machines, the clients on this host, they should also be able to use this interface to communicate with the rest of the network. Okay, domain. Then my cluster network 2, 101. This was my network. Let's have a look here, 101 for the SMB traffic. Okay, so we should use the SMB traffic or SMB name here. For sure, clients should not use this network. This is only for SMB traffic. If this is an iSCSI connection, we have the checkbox do not allow cluster network communication on this network. Typically, this is pre-selected if you have an iSCSI configuration. Do not allow cluster network communication on this network. In iSCSI, allow cluster no client for SMB. The cluster network 3, yeah, this was the network where I said I want to use this network in the 102 for the live migration. I will migration. It's also only cluster. And then the last one, it's the cluster internal network. So now you can see we have 3 networks for cluster communication. This will be the first one for the SMB traffic. The second one will be for the live migration traffic. The third one will be for the cluster internal communication. It's an RN, looks a little bit like an M, but it's an RN, the cluster internal communication. And this is, yeah, for sure, where we also have the heartbeat available. If we lose, for example, the SMB network and the live migration, the cluster internal could also be still available, or vice versa. So the advantage of this having this cluster internal communication, additionally, we have the situation that we have more redundancy. Important is about the live migration. The live migration settings, they still allow live migration via each network. You will find the live migration settings on the upper right-hand side, and every network will be used for live migration. I don't want this. I want to have live migration only via the live migration network. So when we are using the checkboxes, then checkbox means this network can be used for live migration. For sure, we could also use an ranking where we could say, okay, if the live migration network is not available, the domain network can be used. In this scenario, the live migration network is the preferred. The second is the domain. What I mentioned first was not correct. The domain network is not only used when the live migration network is not available, it's also used if the live migration is fully loaded. If we need additional resources, then it will use the domain network. And for sure, I don't want this. I only want the live migration network here in this configuration. Okay. So we have configured the networks. We have configured the live migration settings. We still don't have any storage, and the storage can be configured via PowerShell. Yes, you need PowerShell, but it's very easy. I'm on OneNote here, and I'm using the PowerShell ESE, and I'm using an administrative connection. Run as administrator. And let's increase the font size a little bit. I didn't install anything about Microsoft HCI or Storage Spaces Direct. I installed Hyper-V and I configured a cluster. And when we have a configured cluster set or cluster configuration, then we can use on one of the nodes the command enable -cluster s2d. And there are many, many attributes for this cluster s2d. We can configure the pool friendly name. We can disable the auto configuration, the cache state, and so on. But it's not recommended to use any of these attributes. So the PowerShell you need is this single command. You have configured the cluster. You have seen the steps in the Failover Cluster Manager. And now you are running enable cluster s2d for cluster storage spaces direct. Now let's execute this. Say yes to all. Now, Storage Spaces Direct claims all the disks in the nodes, and each of my servers has 4 drives, all the disks of the nodes, brings the disks to a Storage Spaces Direct pool, makes the pool high available. It creates the cluster performance history. We will see this in one of the later tech talks where we are using Windows Admin Center to manage such a solution. So now we are only at the configuration. So now we are only configuring the environment. It's enabling cluster S2D. What maybe we can do if we have enough time, I'm afraid we will cover this in one of the next tech talks. Maybe we have some minutes to install the Windows Admin Center. Otherwise, we will see this in a future tech talk. So we enabled cluster storage spaces direct. Now we have our configuration. We still don't see any disks, but now we have a pool. We have the cluster pool. Very important, you should not configure any pool-related things here in a storage spaces direct cluster. So please never use the storage part. But for sure, you can use the nodes here. You can use the roles to configure high available virtual machines. We use the networks. And what we have to do to finalize our cluster configuration, we need some witness configuration. Here we can see actually we don't have a witness. This means if a node fails, we don't have a guarantee for a failover, because what did the cluster do? The cluster said, okay, I have a 2-node cluster. Both nodes are up. Both nodes can have a vote, but because we don't have a witness configured, one node has no vote. This means if node 2 fails, node 1 will survive. If node 1 fails, node 2 will not survive. If we have a split here between these two servers, node 2 will go offline, node 1 will stay online. And node 1 will take the whole traffic, all the virtual machines we will have in this cluster in the future. So for sure, this is not perfect from the configuration. This means we need a witness. We can go to the cluster name here in the failover cluster manager, choose more actions, configure cluster quorum settings. We are configuring the quorum, so the majority of votes. And here we choose select quorum witness or advanced quorum witness configuration. Both is possible. When we now go to the wizard, we can decide that every node will have a vote. Yes, this is fine for me. And I want to configure a file share witness. These are the possible witness types: file share, cloud. Disk is not available when we are running storage spaces direct, and I enabled storage spaces direct, so the disk-based witness is not available. If you are using Windows Admin Center, then you have the disk option not available. Let's take the file share witness. And when we choose the file share witness, we can select a server, for example, the D201-SRV01. Yeah, I will browse this server. Sorry, I can show shared folders, can create a new shared folder, and I will create this new shared folder on drive C. I have a folder shares here, shares, and the share name should be in the shares, a new folder. It's the witness. Oops. Witness. Okay. No, it didn't take the name. Sorry for this. I will rename it here, witness. It has already the new name, but yeah, here I didn't see the renaming. The share name is witness, and we have the situation that we have custom permissions because we don't want to have everyone with read, but what we want to have is that we have the computer objects, and we have the two computers, so the 201 minus S2D CLN01. This is the first node. This one has full control, and the second node also. D01 minus S2D CLN02. It's also full control, and I want to add the domain. This is only for me. This is not required to have the domain admins here. I only also want to access this, and I will remove the everyone here. Okay. Okay, and I want to use this witness share, and now we can finish this, and now we can see we have a witness in this configuration. It's a file share witness. It's fine here, perfect. No cluster events in the last hour, also fine. And the nodes now both have a vote. And now we are ready to bring workload to this cluster. But as you can see, we are at the end of this hour. But what, in my opinion, is a good idea to take the first step, how to work with a newly installed cluster, to the tech talk tomorrow, because tomorrow we have a tech talk at 11:30. So depending on your time zone, the same time we started today, it's for your questions. For sure, if you fill the full hour with your questions about Microsoft technologies and Microsoft licensing, this hour is for you. But if we don't have enough questions to fill the complete hour, I will use the remaining time to show you how to bring the first workload on the new installed Hyper-V cluster based on Storage Spaces Direct. So it's available, it's ready. We have reached our target that was planned for today, and we will add some initial usage steps tomorrow. So hopefully you enjoyed this Tech Talk hour. Hopefully you got a lot of insights and information. You have seen how to configure a cluster. I would be happy to see you again tomorrow in the Tech Talk at the same time we had the Tech Talk today for your questions. For sure, you can use the remaining time to also place your questions here in the chat. Just use the chat and I will receive the questions here. On October the 17th, we will see how to install Hyper-V and deploy virtual machines. And on October the 24th in the Tech Talks, we will